Exway's newest electric skateboard, the Exway Flex, is a game changer. This is the first time that Exway has released a new board at under $700. This is also their first board to use a flexy deck with 2 enclosures, which means Exway is going to compete head-on with some of the most popular electric skateboard brands, including, of course, boosted boards. I've been using this prototype for a few days and I have a ton of information to share. So take a seat, get comfortable, hit that like button, and let's get started. This bamboo and fiberglass deck is beautiful. The concave is not just the left and right edges curving upward. The edges at the cutouts also curve up forward and back, sort of like the wheel flares on a loaded Icarus. This design has a number of benefits. 1, it gives you better turning control of your board. 2, you always know where your feet are without having to look down. And 3, it's far less likely for your foot to accidentally touch the wheel. This deck is flexy and better at absorbing road vibrations compared to the deck on the X1 and X1 Pro, which have no flex. But it's not as flexy as many of the competing boards around the same price, which may or may not be a good thing depending on your personal preference. Not everybody wants a very flexy deck. The deck has a micro tail to make picking up the board easier. It's effective and kind of cute. Like the X1 Pro, this deck has a shock-absorbing grip tape. If it looks a little bit too small for the deck, that's because it is. This is a pre-production board and I'm told the final grip tape will cover the entire top of the deck. Exway now uses their own in-house trucks, which they call Trist. Some people were concerned that since Exway is not a skate truck company, that their trucks might not be as good as the seismic Aeons, which they use on the X1 and X1 Pro. That is an understandable concern, but the Trist is actually really good. There's no slop, they carve well even at 45 degrees, and they look freaking awesome. The Trist should actually be considered a premium truck. For example, Paris has the V3 as their budget truck, and the Savant as their premium truck. The difference is in how they're manufactured. One is cast while the other is forged. Forged trucks are stronger than cast trucks. The Trist is a forged truck for strength and refined with CNC machining for precision. No other board around the same price has trucks like these. The bushings that come stock on the Trist are also really good. They are 98 Duro super high rebound bushings. The ones that Exway sent me are green, but the final color will be orange. If you want more stability and rebound, Exway has produced their own CNC machined washers. These are sold separately. When you put them on, they make the board feel like you've tightened your trucks without you actually doing so. You know that you're not supposed to tighten your trucks too much, right? This is just another way for you to fine-tune how you want your board to feel. Like the X1 Pro, the Flex gives you the option of using hub motors or belt drive, both made by Hobbywing. The drive systems for the Flex and the X1 Pro are not interchangeable because the plugs are different. On the Flex, the hub motors are called Hub V2, and the belt drive motors are called Riot V2. I haven't tried the hub motors on this board, so I'm mainly going to cover Riot. Riot V2 has been redesigned and is now quieter and more efficient than Riot V1. I wouldn't call it quiet though, but it is quieter than Riot on the X1 Pro. Riot V2 now uses 15mm wide belts instead of 10mm for improved durability. The wheel pulleys have also been updated to use 15mm belts. Just like the previous Riot, Riot V2 comes with 3 different sets of pulleys, so you can have a wide variety of options for wheels. Because of the large cutouts and wheel flares, the Exway Flex should be able to accept larger wheels than the X1 Pro. The wheels that come stock on the Flex are 85mm 76A. That's really soft and should give you excellent grip. The battery pack is 259 watt-hours, made up of Sony VTC6 cells in a 12S2P arrangement. Based on the info I could find online from Vapors, the Sony VTC6 is very similar to the popular Samsung 30Q, used in many electric skateboards today. The battery is swappable by removing the 6 screws, much like a boosted board, and other boards that use 2 enclosures. Although this is not a quick swappable battery, it is more convenient to unplug and replug this battery compared to the competitors. Exway calls this battery a smart battery because of its advanced BMS. So without getting into the technical details, because I can't really explain it anyway, what does that mean for you as the user? Here are a couple of examples. With most electric skateboards, if you don't plan on using the board for a long time, you should not charge this battery to 100% because that'll reduce its lifespan more quickly. With Exway Smart Battery, if you don't use your board for a long time, the battery will automatically discharge to 60%, which is better for long-term storage. On many boards, you see the battery level fluctuate when you accelerate. With Exway Smart Battery, the battery indicator becomes much more accurate and doesn't jump around. There are other examples that were explained to me, but since this is outside my areas of expertise, I don't want to say too much and make a mistake. Hopefully someone else, preferably Exway themselves, can do a better job explaining the Smart Battery. The board ships with a 1.5 amp charger that charges the board from empty to full in 4 to 5 hours. Exway will release a 4 amp quick charger in the future that should cut that time by more than half. Exway Flex, of course, uses the very well-reputed ESC manufactured by Hobbywing. As far as I know, Exway was the first electric skateboard brand to use Hobbywing's ESC. They were also the first board to have a Hobbywing remote with a display, the first to use Hobbywing motors, and is still the only Hobbywing board to have certain features such as firmware updates and standby mode. It's almost as if Exway is Hobbywing's guinea pig. Just like the battery, the ESC enclosure is also very well designed. The remote, as far as I can tell, is still the same minimalist remote Exway has used since their first board, the X1. It was always a good remote and it still is today. The control is as intuitive as it always has been. But since there are now competing brands with remotes that are equally good, or arguably slightly better, I'd like to offer some suggestions. First, let's switch to USB Type-C. The micro USB port is still okay, I guess, since many cameras and phones still use it, but I'd rather everything just use Type-C. Second, most other remotes with telemetry displays include a trip meter and odometer, but Exway's remote doesn't. I asked them about this in the past, and I was told that they didn't include them in the remote because they already have those features in the mobile app. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like the idea of holding the remote in one hand and my phone in the other while I'm riding. And third, I would prefer to have a dedicated reverse switch. Right now, the default way to go into reverse is to triple-click the multi-purpose button. I know that reverse is not super important at all, but when the reverse feature is easily accessible, such as on the standard Hobbywing remote, I actually use it quite often. If you give me a way to be lazy, I will use it. Yes, I'm aware of the optional free mode feature that turns brake into reverse. I prefer the default brake setting. But these things I mentioned are really just nitpicks. Overall, great ESC and great remote. They were great on the previous boards, and they're still great on this board. The speed is where many people have misconceptions about this board. When Exway revealed that they were releasing a new board, I think most people familiar with Exway expected it to keep all the best things about the X1 Pro, but have a flexy deck and more range. In most people's minds, that would essentially be an upgraded X1 Pro, but that's not what Exway had in mind. In the CEO's own words, the X1 Pro is Exway's high-end board, and the Flex, believe it or not, is their budget board. Basically, all these competing brands are making boards that are, in Vic's opinion, very easy to make, and people are buying them. So Exway was like, since this type of board is so easy to make, we'll make one also, and we'll do it better than everyone else. So here's their budget board. And because this is their budget board, the performance and speed is not quite like the X1 Pro, which, if you don't know, is one of the quickest boards that you can buy. Unlike the X1 Pro, turbo increases only the acceleration and not the top speed. The acceleration is noticeably lower than the X1 Pro, but I think it's similar to its direct competitors. It's hard to tell for sure without comparing different boards side by side. I asked Vic if the reduced performance is due to hardware limitations, and he said it's not. They purposely limited the performance in software. He gave two reasons. One, for safety, because this board uses a flexi deck, and two, because each of Exway's boards has their own specialties. The X1 Pro is their high-performance board, while the Flex is more for casual use. I'm gonna take a wild guess and predict that when they sell out of X1 Pros, they'll release a firmware update that allows the Flex to go faster and accelerate harder. Just a wild guess. Some people are heavy and some people live in places that have hills. More torque is always better. It's not like the board doesn't have multiple speed modes and an app to limit each mode's performance. About that top speed of 38 km per hour, I actually hit 41 km per hour. There was probably a slight downhill slope. I mention this because if you see my other videos, you know that I normally don't ride that fast. But I just felt really confident on this board. I think the trucks have a lot to do with it. The brakes are really good, at least until the board is low on power. For some reason, when the power is low, the brakes become really weak. The X1 and X1 Pro are not like this. So I'm pretty sure that this is something that they'll fix in a firmware update before the board is for sale. By the time you're watching this video, they've probably fixed it already. Good braking behavior is really important to me, and it's why I feel only lukewarm about so many other boards. I don't care about top speed and acceleration nearly as much as how the brakes feel. Aside from the weak brakes, which I'm sure they'll fix, the braking performance on this board is great, just like on the X1 and X1 Pro. According to my scale, this board is 7.6 kilograms, so around the same weight as the X1 Pro. The Flex is about as portable as its direct competitors, such as the boosted board. But I would rank the Exway Flex as more convenient to carry around because of its standby feature. Standby lets you disable your board or turn it back on by using just the remote. You don't need to bend down to push the power button on the board because
that's disgusting.
Like I said, if you give me a way to be lazy, I will use it. Exway's boards have always been especially water resistant. And even though the Flex uses 2 enclosures instead of a unibody design, it should still do a good job of preventing water from touching the electronics because both enclosures are very well sealed. As usual, I would still recommend against riding this board in the rain or on wet surfaces. Even if damaging the electronics is unlikely, this is still a skateboard. Some parts can eventually rust, and skateboard wheels don't perform well at all on wet surfaces. This is by far the most polished looking board under $700. Nothing else comes close. The deck looks f***ing awesome, and it's not only because of the shape. Instead of a shiny gloss like most boards, Exway uses a matte gloss finish on the carbonized bamboo and also on the bottom side. I know this is subjective, but to me, matte gloss almost always looks better than a shiny gloss. These Trist Trucks are the best looking trucks I've ever seen, aesthetically. I'm not even exaggerating. I mean, look at that. They're like Batman trucks. The enclosures look really great also. I like the shape and the grainy matte texture. They're like Batman enclosures. And this power indicator is kind of cool. The wheels look great as always. The clear cores are pretty nice. If I had to nitpick, I guess I don't love the graphic design, especially over here where it looks like it wasn't cut properly. But I think the overall industrial design is fantastic. And I like that there's a consistency and uniqueness in the design that's very Exway. It's just very professional. I measured the range twice on this board. Both times I started from a full battery and stopped a little under 10% when the top speed dropped below 16 kilometers per hour. Both times I was using the Riot motors. My weight with everything I was carrying was 76.7 kilograms. On the first test, the weather was 6 degrees Celsius. On the second, it was 12 degrees. Most of the time I was riding around 25 to 35 kilometers per hour, sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. On my first range test, I got 21.4 kilometers according to the Ride app. On my second test, I got 20.8 kilometers. I also measured using my tick watch and the numbers were similar. Those numbers are pretty much what I would expect for this type of board with this type of battery. Relative to other boards that are similar in size and battery capacity, the range is not better or worse. They're about the same. In Exway's marketing materials, they claim a range of 20 miles, which is 32 kilometers. There's no footnote or fine print about how they got that number, so I asked Vic about it. That number was based on a 70 kilogram user in speed mode 2, traveling at an average of about 20 kilometers per hour, with a full stop about once every kilometer. So basically a very, very casual ride. They should write that explanation somewhere that's easy to find. They could also write 2 numbers instead, like 10 to 20 miles, so customers understand that the range can vary a lot depending on the number of variables. Even if you weigh the same as me, the range that you get can be very different from what I get, depending on how you ride and your environment. Compared to other boards under $700, the Exway Flex is, in my opinion, the most well-designed and most future-proof electric skateboard today. Most e-skate manufacturers have a good understanding of electronics, but very few have founders who have an in-depth understanding of longboards and use their own products the way that their most hardcore customers use their products. From using the Exway Flex, it's very obvious that the designers of this board understand what makes a good deck, what makes a good truck, bushings, washers. They understand that brakes should feel strong and predictable, like in a car. I mention this stuff because I try a lot of boards, and oftentimes I feel like the designer of a board either doesn't really skate, or they only test their boards in a straight line in a big open area with no obstacles. And that's not the case with Exway. From using this board, I feel like Exway really knows what they're doing. And because the firmware on this board can be updated, that opens up possibilities for future improvements. In the past, Exway has improved the brakes and battery performance on their boards through various firmware updates. They'll likely make similar improvements on this one. If you're deciding between the Exway Flex and a boosted board, I think you just gotta look at the price. Even if they cost the same, I would still choose the Exway. I like the deck more, I like having a display on the remote, it has more range, I love standby mode. I would even say that it looks better, but that's just my opinion. Compared to other boards around the same price that use the same form factor, it's not even a fair competition. I'm very curious to see what the other brands are gonna do. They might just have to lower their prices or boost their marketing to compete. I don't really know. Or maybe they don't have to do anything because Exway's marketing is almost non-existent. If the other brands want to improve their boards to be as good as this one, it's easy. Improve the brakes, the deck, the trucks, the BMS, add firmware updates, add standby mode, hire a professional industrial designer, and that's about it. This is my favorite board right now, by far. Game over. But is it right for you? Maybe, maybe not. I think it mostly depends on if this form factor is right for you. If you need an all-terrain board or a mini board, then of course this is probably not for you. But if this is the form factor you're looking for and $700 is within your budget, I think this is the best option right now. Look in the video description if you want to know how to get this board.